Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Mary Magdalene runs to the tomb early on the first day of the week. She does not go there for a happy occasion. Her Lord and her friend has died, and she's gone to prepare his body for final burial. But when she gets there, what she sees makes her heart drop. It had to have been the worst sight that she could possibly imagine, because the stone that was in front of the tomb had been moved. And this could only mean one thing to her in that moment. Someone has come and taken Jesus' body. They beat him, they whipped him, they crucified him, they mocked him, they spat on him, but apparently that wasn't enough. Now they had to go and desecrate it. And so, if she went to the tomb full of grief and anger to begin with, she leaves the tomb with even more grief and anger. And she runs to get the disciples. She runs to tell someone what has happened, to figure it out. She finds Peter and John. She tells them, and they go running. And they go running with the same grief and the same confusion and the same anger, but probably also tinged with a little, well, hopefully Mary saw something else. Maybe she was looking at a different tomb, right? Maybe this couldn't possibly be true. But when they get there, they see the same thing. The rock that had been in front of the tomb has been moved. Jesus' body must have been taken. They look into the tomb, and what they see surprises them. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense, because what they found in the tomb was the linens that had wrapped up Jesus' body. Linens are expensive. Linens were expensive 2,000 years ago. Linens are expensive today. When we have to go and buy a new linen for the altar or linen cloths to wipe the chalice, they're expensive. If grave robbers had come to take and do something with Jesus' body, they would not have left the most valuable thing in the tomb there. Also weird is the other linen, the smaller one that would have gone over Jesus' face, has been neatly folded and sat on the bed of the tomb. So, I mean, maybe the grave robbers were just like in a hurry or something and they left the one behind, but they wouldn't fold the other one and then go and do something with Jesus' body. This doesn't make sense. Peter and John don't understand what's happening. John, the author of the gospel, says they do not understand yet that he must have died and rise again on the third day. And so they leave. John tells us they go home. I'm assuming there, by home, he means they went back to the upper room, because home was in Galilee, a couple days' journey. They probably went back to where the other disciples were, just like Mary went to them to talk it through, what's going on. But John, the author of the gospel, also tells us that as they head off home, Mary Magdalene stays alone in the cemetery. Mary Magdalene stays by the tomb. She lingers there. John tells us that she wept. She just took a moment to just be and grieve and let herself feel whatever she was feeling. And of course then, she had to look in the tomb too. Wouldn't you? If you were her, I'd want to. And so she bends down and looks in the tomb. And now I got to break that story and go to another story, okay? That's about 1,500 years earlier. You've all heard of the Ark of the Covenant? Hopefully you've at least seen the Indiana Jones movie. Right? Okay, it's a box. It's a wood box. It's wrapped in gold. God told Moses to make this box. In this box was held the tablets of the Ten Commandments, Aaron's rod, and a container of the manna from the wilderness. The box had a lid, also wrapped in gold, and on the lid were two golden angels, two statues of angels. And the angels were facing each other, and their wings were outstretched toward each other. Remember the scene? Raiders of the Lost Ark, you got it? Okay. Between the angels, facing in with their wings outstretched, was a space, and in that space was nothing. Nothing was there, which would have been really weird in the ancient world. Every other nation, every other pagan religion, every other city with a temple in it, they would have put in that spot with the angels facing in, they would have put right there an idol, a statue, a representation of their god, perhaps made out of wood or made out of clay. In this case, it probably would have been made out of gold, and that's what would have been the focus of their worship. You have these two angels in an obvious position of worship. It would have made sense if they were bowing down to that idol that was sitting there. But on the Ark of the Covenant, there's nothing. There's nothing in that spot that everyone else in the ancient world would have put something in. It's empty, but it's not empty. The Old Testament, time and time again, tells us that in that spot, atop the ark, between the angels, is the place where God actually was. Not a statue or a representation of God, but the actual presence of God. It was so there, on top of that ark, God dwelt with his people. When they walked through the wilderness, God went with them atop the ark. When they made it to the promised land, God made it with them on the ark. When Solomon builds the temple, they put the ark in there, and God dwells with his people in his city, in his nation, right there with them. It's this empty space, but it is an empty space that is infused with meaning. It is the holiest spot in Israel, and dare we say, the world. Okay, back to Easter. So, remember when the boys who ran off, when they looked in, they saw those linens there. Mary looks in the tomb. We don't know if she saw the linens. John doesn't report that, because something else overshadows the linens. She sees two angels. And John tells us that one of the angels is at the foot of the tomb, and one of the angels is at the head of the tomb. And between these two angels, in the spot where the body of Jesus should have been, if this was a normal day, it was empty. This is an obvious hearkening back to the Ark of the Covenant. Or we could say the Ark of the Covenant was a foreshadowing of what would happen on the day of resurrection. Or we could say that this empty spot, like that empty spot, is infused with meaning and has become the holiest spot in the world. John, whose writings, his gospel, his epistles, the revelation to John, are chock full of temple imagery. He does not say that there's an angel at the foot and an angel at the head willy-nilly. He wants us to see the Ark of the Covenant in our minds. Mary, however, in her grief, in her sorrow, in her confusion, in her anger, she misses this. In fact, she apparently even misses that they're angels, because they start talking to her, and she starts talking to them just like they're normal people, like where is he? Where's Jesus? If she knew they were angels, she might have said something different. And then Jesus arrives. Jesus arrives. And Mary turns and faces this man whom she knew. And she mistakes him for the gardener, just like she mistook the angels for something else. She doesn't understand who she's talking to. Jesus starts speaking with her. She speaks back. And then he calls her by name, Mary. And when he calls her by name, it's like the whole scene just comes to light. It's like the lights come on. And finally, she's able to see who it is she's speaking to. That this person who was supposed to be in a tomb has risen from the dead. What she assumed was bad news when she saw the stone removed is now good news, or great news, or the greatest news. And if Mary had not had stayed, she wouldn't have had this experience. If she followed Peter and John, the boys, off home, she would have missed all that. Peter and John, if they had stayed, maybe they would have seen the angels. Maybe they would have seen the angels for what they were, this symbol which is infused with meaning, this empty spot which has become the holiest place in the world. Maybe they too would have seen the risen Christ. Maybe Christ would have spoken their name. We will never know because they left. For Mary to have this experience on this holy morning, she had to linger and abide and wait and just be. Easter is a busy day. It's a holiday. All of our holidays are usually busy, right? Some of us had to get up probably very early in the morning to see if the Easter bunny come. Did he come? Any reports? Yes? Please tell me he came. Okay, good. And then we had to go around and find the eggs that were hidden. And then we had to house some of our Easter candy. How many of you have already eaten Easter candy? Come on. You're in church. You got to tell the truth. All right? Excellent. Okay, good. Later, we might have family coming over for lunch or for dinner, and so we'll need to go home from here. We'll need to cook things. We might need to straighten some things up. Maybe we'll be having dinner with family or friends somewhere else. We'll need to cook a dish and put it together and get ourselves gussied up and go out to it. Maybe we have brunch plans after this, and you're really hoping the sermon lands soon so that you don't miss your reservations, right? Easter's busy. And tomorrow, it's going to be busy. And the day after that, busy? Busy. Our lives are infused with busyness. It is easy to go with Peter and John and just go from this thing to the next thing. It would be easy to just get Easter done. It would be easy to just put another Easter in the books. It would be easy to relegate faith to something that we do when we got the time, we've got ourselves together. But this story of the most important moment in human history, when the people who loved Jesus the most find out that he has risen and that death has been conquered forever. This story is also an invitation to follow our sister, Mary Magdalene, to stay, to remain, to slow down, to linger, to wait and see what God is actually doing here and now. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are wired for bad news. Our brains are wired for always on the lookout for things that are of danger to us. Neuroscience tells us that our brains latch on to negative images or words instantly. Like in a nanosecond, our brain grabs onto it. Science also tells us that our brains are not as equally wired for good things, for beautiful things, for wonderful things, for things that we cherish. Like our brain grabs onto a negative image or word, it takes our brains 8 seconds to process the good, the beautiful, the wonderful, the holy. And we all know this. We all know this because we all have gotten like 99 emails telling us how wonderful we are, and how great things are, and how thankful people are for you, and how great you are, and everything's good. And then you get that one email that's not so great. And out of those 100 emails, what one do you remember? For the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of your life. Right? Like you just play, like our brains just latch onto it. When I visit people in the hospital or at home, they're sick, something's going on with them, 9 times out of 10, the TV's on, and 9 times out of 10, it's on the news. And when I get there, usually they mute the TV, and so we're sitting there, the TV screen is still on, we just can't hear it, and we're talking. But you know how breaking news goes like every 3.5 minutes? There has to be another like breaking news. And then there's that banner that goes, it's red, and there's like white and yellow, and it's a woo, right? I'll be talking to the person, and out of the corner of our eye, we'll see breaking news, and we'll go. I'm amazed by it every time. Every time. But if something lovely was on the TV, if something was wonderful, holy, beautiful, we wouldn't even notice it. The way that God made us, we need to slow down to soak in that which is good and beautiful and holy and wonderful. Mary Magdalene, the first to see the risen Christ, the first to speak to the risen Christ, the first to hear the risen Christ speak her name, teaches us to linger at the threshold of what God is doing and to wait and to watch and to listen. Easter changed everything. It changes everything. And it can change our hearts, and it can change our lives, and dare I say, it could change the world if we take the time to let it. If we follow the ancient way of taking time like this, right here, to let God in, to let God speak, to let God move. Death has been defeated. Life has won. God's life has won. A life that has no end, a life that begins here. Do you hear your name being called? You could. You should. Amen.